Casey's biggest hits.
4 years ago this week, one of the biggest hits in the USA was "Do I Have to Say the Words" by a star who spent his early years going to military school. He says to this day he keeps his hair short because of it. I'll have details and that big hit after this.
Casey's Top 40.
Well, now we're up to the number one song in the USA on Casey's Top 40, and it's by a rock star who looks so little like a rock star that he's almost never recognized in public. Since he first hit the top 40 in 1983 with a top 10 smash straight from the heart, he's returned to the top 10 time and time again with smashes like Run to You, Somebody, and Heaven. But he's never let rock stardom affect his lifestyle. The result is a rock star who's a star because of his music and not because of his image. Not long ago, this Canadian singer was playing a series of sold-out concerts in one of the biggest cities in the world, and a reporter from Rolling Stone followed him around the town just to see how people reacted. He reported that the star emerged from his hotel looking like no one very famous, wearing old jeans, battered sneakers, and a denim jacket. The rock star's blonde hair was on the short side. He looked like any one of millions of guys in their 20s. The reporter followed the star as he walked through the crowded streets, and not once did anyone take note of him. Then they got on a bus and sat there with dozens of other commuters and shoppers. Nobody seemed to notice, and when the reporter went along to the bank where the star tried to cash some traveler's checks, he saw the young singer get hassled for not having proper ID. Finally, the two drove to the hall where the Canadian rocker was playing that night. The star stood right in the middle of the crowd, and except for a couple of teenage girls who looked at the rocker a bit curiously, nobody seemed to recognize him. Well, his fans may not recognize his face on the street, but they sure recognize his music on the charts. He's had 8 big top 10s, including his latest hit, the song that for the 4th week in a row is the biggest hit in the USA. The number one song in the land on Casey's Top 40 is Everything I Do It For You by Bryan Adams.
You're tuned to the Shadow on American Top 40. He just came off the biggest hit of his career, and he's been hitting the top 40 for 9 years. So let's take a chronological look back at Bryan Adams.
Straight from the heart. Now cuts like a knife. Oh, but it feels so right. This time, everything is easy any day. I'm gonna make a mind. Got my first real 6-string, bought it at the 5 and dime, played it till my fingers bled. Was the summer of '69. One night love affair, pretending it ain't there. Oh, now we're left with nothing. You are a shadow, and nothing else matters. It's only love, and that's all. In the heat of the night, this heart's on fire. One thing, honey, this heart's true, yeah. It's gonna help you when you've had enough. It ain't no secret, you're a victim of love.
And that's AT40's chronological collection of Bryan Adams, who started out with his very first top 40 hit in 1983, a top 10 song called Straight from the Heart. Then Cuts Like a Knife, this time Run to You, Somebody, Bryan's first number one, Heaven, then Summer of '69, One Night Love Affair, a duet with Tina Turner called It's Only Love, then Heat of the Night, Hearts on Fire, and Victim of Love. The biggest hit of Bryan's career, Everything I Do It For You, was a number one that just fell out of the countdown, and his follow-up holds at number 5.
Hit from coast to coast.
But on the way up is a singer who can tell you firsthand what television is like in other parts of the world. When he was 10 years old, Bryan Adams was living in Portugal because his dad was in the Canadian military and they traveled around a lot. He says they didn't have much TV then. The only things I watched were cartoons like the Jetsons and the Flintstones. My favorite, though, was Bugs Bunny. There was more intellectual value in Bugs.
Casey's Top 40.
Well, now we're up to the latest smash for a star who says his worst nightmare once came true right in the middle of a show. He was singing in front of 200,000 people, and hardly anyone could hear a word. Bryan Adams is famous for being a musical perfectionist. He likes to be in control of every aspect of his performance, especially the technical side of things, which is why he was more than a little worried when he was invited to perform in an outdoor show right next to the Berlin Wall. It was a celebration of the destruction of that wall, and it was attended by more than 200,000 screaming fans. Bryan Adams was one of the many artists joining Roger Waters in a performance of the Pink Floyd album The Wall. The number that Bryan was singing was Empty Spaces. Well, the night of that performance, the spaces in front of the stage were anything but empty, and right from the beginning, there were technical problems. The huge speakers would cut in and out, and just a few seconds after Bryan stepped on stage, the speakers went out completely. It was his worst nightmare come true. Bryan says it took all the willpower he had to keep him from running off the stage. Then he got an idea. Without a mic, he began to lead the first few rows of the audience in a sing-along. More people joined in, and soon the song spread like wildfire throughout the audience. Before long, Bryan had thousands and thousands of people singing right along with him, and no one seemed to mind the broken speakers. A little bit of ingenuity and a large dose of courage had saved the day. This week, Bryan's sound equipment is in tip-top shape, and so is his voice.
AT40 Music.
Canadian rock star Bryan Adams is currently out on a whale of a music tour, literally. At every stop on his latest 15-city swing through America, Bryan's having Save the Whale postcards placed on every seat. He's asking fans to mail them to presidents of countries who are members of the International Whaling Commission. Bryan's been doing it in Europe for the past 3 months and already claimed success. He says Whaling Commission offices have been barraged with sacks of postcards from Adams fans.
AT40 Music News.
Casey's biggest hits.
11 years ago this week, back in 1984, one of the biggest hits in the USA was by a star whose albums often run late. And he's got a good excuse. Hardly a month goes by when he isn't playing at one benefit show or another. The list of causes that Bryan Adams works for is encyclopedic. He just can't say no. He's worked for Live Aid, Amnesty International, the Prince's Trust, Greenpeace, the Fund for Disaster Relief, the Special Olympics, and many more good causes, which is why there's often a space of 2 or 3 years between Bryan's albums. He's too busy saving the world to get into the studio. 11 years ago this week, Bryan Adams had one of the biggest hits in the USA.
Number 25.
Climbing 3 notches is Bryan Adams, a Canadian rocker who recently stopped in New York City for a whirlwind promotional tour. He played that night on The Late Show with David Letterman, and then he woke up early the next morning to do an outdoor performance in Rockefeller Plaza for the Today Show.
Casey's biggest hits.
4 years ago this week, one of the biggest hits in the USA was by a star who spent his early years going to military school. He says to this day he keeps his hair short because of it. Bryan Adams grew up the son of a Canadian diplomat who was often posted overseas. Bryan's father believed in the virtues of a military education, and so Bryan spent his preteen and teen years in military schools in England, Austria, Portugal, and Israel. He says there are certain habits he picked up in military school that will probably always be with him, like always putting his clothes away neatly, packing as little as need be, and keeping his hair relatively close-cropped. Bryan says he just isn't comfortable with long hair, even if it is what most rockers wear.
America's Top Hits.
16 years ago this week, back in 1983, one of the top hits in the USA was by a rock star who does so many benefit concerts, he's actually had to shut down his career at times to take care of all his commitments. The list of benefits that this Canadian rocker has played at is encyclopedic. He's performed for Greenpeace. He's played at the Prince's Trust. He's worked for the Special Olympics, for Amnesty International, to feed the hungry, to end apartheid, to help the Memorial Fund for Disaster Relief, and many, many more. He's so busy that he's actually had to postpone concert tours and cancel weeks of recording sessions just to take care of the many charities that need his voice. 16 years ago this week, deeply committed Bryan Adams had one of the top hits in the USA. Here's Bryan with Straight from the Heart.
I could start dreaming about it now.